Okay, so you should get that notification. Just click off it and then we're good to go. So yeah, this is integrating psychosocial development into coaching. I'll briefly introduce myself. I'm Tom. I'm a senior lecturer in sport coaching at Leeds Beckett University. I'm also a grassroots coach, a coach developer. I'm Academy Sports Psych at Doncaster Rovers. And I've been doing that for 8 or 9 years at the university, and then I've had sort of 12, 13 years of teaching in other contexts. I've got a real interest in psychosocial development through coaching, and more broadly what academy football environments can do for psychosocial development. Done some work for I Coach Kids, League Football Education, the FA, and others, and all my details are on there. So if you've got questions after or you want to connect, it's all there for you. But again, yeah, it's great. Thanks very much for coming.
Yeah, so evening everybody. This is my sort of background. So I've been coaching football for just over 20 years. So first 10 years or so were grassroots and open age kind of men's football. The last 10 years have been more in the youth development phase in academies, the various ones that are listed there, all at Cat 3. So I did my first degree was in psychology. Wasn't really a big fan of that as a course in general, but I did really enjoy the sports psych module, so decided to follow that up a few years later and do a master's, which I loved. And one of the recommendations was that we did a coaching badge, so I started off doing my level 2, and I've worked my way up through to B licence and advanced youth award. Also, a bit like Tom, been lecturing in sports science and coaching for the last 15 years. I've been a performance psychologist for 20 odd years, working with some top level athletes in mixed martial arts, also golf, athletics, and football. As I say, the last 10 years or so, that's been concentrated in academy football. So trying to merge those two roles together. Towards the end of doing a doctorate, my final study is around embedding the psychosocial skills into sessions actually on the pitch, which is where I've kind of converged with Tom's interests, and that's where we've collaborated. So as Tom mentioned already, we're looking at the what, the why, and the how with psychosocial skills. There tends to be a lot of kind of jargon and academic kind of terms around what it is, which can be very confusing. So hopefully we're going to demystify that a little bit this evening and try and put it in quite simple terms. And then the why is a little bit more about justifying why it's important. And then the how, probably the most important bit, is what it looks like in terms of how we can take this onto the pitch and through coaches mainly, because they're the ones that spend most time with the players. Can we get them to be comfortable with the terminology and delivering these skills and characteristics on the pitch?
Okay. So just following on from that initial outcome of sort of definitions and trying to situate what we're talking about, really. Really nice piece of work by Leah Dome and colleagues is like splitting these up into psychological skills and psychological characteristics. So we've got this kind of locker metaphor, if you like, and the skills are things that you can teach, things that are teachable. You might do a workshop on goal setting or a one-to-one performance psychology meeting around imagery and try and support the development of skills and tools and those kind of things to try and support performance. So skills are those things that are teachable, and it's a skill that then can be placed in a different context, like a football pitch, game, training, those kind of things. Whereas on the other side, we've got characteristics. Now these are built up over time, fostered, developed, honed, if you like, and they can be fostered, developed, honed through integration of certain coaching practices, certain coach behaviors, creating environments that might support the development of some of these things. But these are low and slow. These might take years to develop, whereas skills are something that can be taught and then placed in context. So when we're talking about skills and characteristics, there is a bit of a difference there, and it's worth, when we're thinking about planning our coaching curriculum, these are things and terminologies we need to be reasonably clear on and have a bit of an idea about. Over to you, James, that you can take control as well.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so just to again put that in simpler terms, these are the characteristics that we want to develop in our players. We can do this in various ways. The traditional way is more sort of classroom workshops, which I think are still vital. So, for example, if you want to explain to a player about imagery or self-talk, goal setting, it's useful to be able to do that in a classroom setting and show videos and clips and whatever. But it also needs to transfer onto the grass at some point. So the mission really is to see how we can embed this in session design. But initially, we need to know what we're looking at. So the difference is psych tends to be internal stuff, so the stuff that goes on inside your head, and then social tends to be sort of between people, so it's external, how you interact with others. So some basic definitions for you. Commitment, so looking to stay involved in a game regardless of the score. If you're winning 5-0, losing 5-0, it's -5 degrees and freezing cold, are you still kind of getting involved in the actions? Confidence, obviously massive belief that you can actually perform at that level. Resilience is a massive sort of buzzword around sport and psychology in particular, so being able to bounce back from setbacks. Emotional control is another massive one. So can you deal with setbacks in the game, like bad decisions from referee, your teammates or your parents, coaches, opponents upsetting you? Can you deal with that effectively? Are you a good learner? So do you take information on? And that's a two-way thing. So you ask questions and you take feedback. And then concentration, obviously being able to focus on the task in hand and not be distracted. In terms of social stuff, teamwork, obviously, can you contribute effectively, unselfishly to the team kind of ethic? Can you communicate? So can you pass ideas to others? Can you take ideas from others? And then leadership, can you influence people in a positive way and guide them effectively? So these skills will help people in football. But more importantly than that, it's bigger than football. So it's not just about the player, it's about the boy or the girl or the person. It's what we call a person-centered approach. So we're teaching them skills that will help them in football, but it will also help them in everyday life outside of football and the transition that happens when they eventually move out of football, whether that's retirement or release or whatever that might be. Okay, so there may be some others in your context, whether that's grassroots academy or whatever. These are the ones, or the main ones, that myself and Tom have found through our research. So over to you, Tom.
Yeah, so I'll take control back, I think. Yeah, okay. So what I wanted to do is just get a little bit of interaction from you. I've got a slide here with a QR code. So if you've got a phone to hand, which I guess most people will have nowadays, we'd be quite interested to see what psychosocial skills and characteristics do you think are important to you and your groups. So if you want to just sort of scan that with your cameras, that'll take you to a questionnaire, if you like, and then we'll be able to get a bit of a Wordle up. And what I'm going to need to do is just jump out the presentation and get that word cloud up. Okay, so just as you're doing that, I'll come out, I'll put the it's an MS Forms up, and it has the QR code as well. So don't worry if it disappears for a second. Okay, so that's that same QR code there, and we should be able to get hopefully some responses there. Yeah, brilliant. That's the sort of stuff we're looking for, which is great. It's really interesting to see what people put. So please, yeah, don't be shy in sharing some of this. Okay, so we've got resilience, commitment, confidence, flexibility, like that one. Guess that's kind of in and around just being adaptable or being adaptive. Yeah, around engagement, which when we talk about definition, we might be around kind of motivation and want and need to learn. Coachability, yeah. So we've got regulating, emotional management, emotional regulation. So similar types of definitions for what I might assume a different kind of, a similar kind of traits. Positivity around kind of, I guess, motivation and that kind of want and need to learn. Commitment, we see sort of in and around the literature that's talking around a motivational aspect to that. Confidence seems pretty popular. Determination, yeah, that's great. And what we're kind of seeing here is that obviously there's around sort of 27, 28 people on the call. There's a range of different psychosocial skills and characteristics that are important to you. And also some of these, by the terms that you're using, might be the same as another term, or they might not be. So going back to what James talked about earlier, is that we've got to really have clear definitions about what it is we're going after. And that's really important. But thank you very much for sharing those. So what I'll do is I'll come off that again and then jump back into the presentation. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, there's some quite similar ones to earlier, Tom, isn't there? I think resilience and emotional control came up most earlier. So commitment, confidence have also come in there as well, which is interesting.
Yeah, massive those. So I'll jump back into the actual presentation now. Okay. So over to the why. That's you, James.
Yeah, so there's a couple of kind of sides to this, really. If we look at a performance side, so if you're working more at the elite level with this, or academy level, there is a really tiny percentage between winning and losing at that level. It's fractional. You'll find that athletes at the elite level of sport, technically, tactically, and physically, will be very similar. And what will separate them on the day of the competition is the psychological and the social factors will make the difference. So if they turn up and they're more confident than their opponents, they concentrate better, they're more committed, they're more resilient, then obviously there's a good chance they're going to outplay them. So just as an example of that, some research was done in the 2016 Olympics, and the difference between first and second place in swimming events, so between gold and silver, was 0.72%. Between bronze and then not being on the podium, it was 0.34%. For every running event from 100 meters up to the marathon, between first and second was 0.66%, and then bronze and fourth place 0.4%. So if we're doing this extra bit on top of the technical, tactical, physical, if we're actually working on these psychosocial skills as well, then that's going to give us a better chance of being better from that performance perspective. There's also just as important as the duty of care side. So estimates of boys in academies that will make it as a pro or even make one pro appearance sort of vary between 1% and 5%. So up to 99% of those boys aren't going to be footballers. So how do we treat the ones that don't make it? Are they just collateral damage, or do we have a duty of care to look after them as well? So I think it's vitally important we try and develop skills in all the kids that we have within football and adults as well, for that matter. Okay, so if we can do this from a younger age as well, it's obviously going to be beneficial, I think, because then they become less resistant to it maybe as they get older and it becomes more of a habit. Okay, so this is a graphic some of you might have seen before. So it's from the Second World War. So this was from bombers that came back from raids. And what they wanted to find out, what the red holes are where the bullet holes were in the bombers that got back. There's a massive flaw in this though, in the fact that these were the ones that survived. What they should have looked at is where there aren't any holes, because those were the planes that actually got shot down. So this is what we call survivor bias. So in football, sport in general, we maybe look at the ones that make it, the ones that are doing well, the ones that are successful, and do we sometimes perhaps ignore the ones that are struggling and probably really need our help? So if we can teach them the skills, then we've got a chance of reaching more players and young people and helping them out. So in terms of that, everyone has unconscious bias. So everyone thinks according to their own experience and knowledge. So this is from a guy called Daniel Kahneman, who had the book's called Thinking Fast and Slow. So basically 95% of our thinking is intuition and instinct. So it's fast thinking. So this is where we kind of maybe judge people. When we first meet people, we'll kind of judge them based on stereotypes and similar people maybe we've met before. And it's not particularly kind of useful in terms of sort of long-term development when we're talking about football. The other 5%, the effortful, slow and logical thinking, is what we really need to focus on and kind of think of people, young people, in their actual context rather than just the player in front of you. What's the boy or the girl or the person actually going through in their life that would affect how they perform, and how can we maybe help them to develop these skills? So if anyone does think they don't have any cognitive biases, I'm just going to show you this video now as a little bit of an example. Okay, so I don't know if everyone got that. So the correct answer was 16. Let me just run it on a little bit. Okay, so the point there is if we're focused too much on one thing, we're going to miss other things. So in the case of football, we tend to have a little bit of an obsession with technical and physical characteristics because they're easy to measure and easy to see in front of us. Whereas things like your psych and your social are hard to measure. They're a bit more abstract and they're a little harder to develop. So yeah, we tend to focus, maybe that's that fast thinking where we focus on what's easier to observe. So another example, here's, you can see the greatest player of all time, Maradona. When you see that picture, maybe you think, wow, what an amazing player. This team, Belgium, who they're playing against, they must be absolutely terrified of him. They put 6 players on him. Okay, if we look at this from a different angle, it might change your view on that. Okay, so if you look at that, he's actually just received the ball from a free kick. So the 6 players were actually in a wall. So the point being, if you look at things from different angles, it can completely change how you see them. So when we're dealing with developing players, this is really important. So to labour the point a little bit more, if you think of the six blind men and the elephant, they've all got their own opinions based on what they're looking at and their own experience, and their elephant would look a little bit like that. So the point is that we need to maybe look at different opinions from different people to get the whole picture and see that person as they really are. We'll come back to that a little bit later. So over to you now, Tom, I think.
Thanks, James. So if we start to maybe bring it back into sort of sport and football a little bit, we've got this idea of physical and psychosocial maturational differences. So if you're working with groups or squads of age categorized players, you might encounter those that develop really early, so they grow really tall quicker than the rest of them, or those that don't, so they remain, for example, quite short, for example. That might be that physical parameter that we're just looking at, but there's other ways we can kind of look at that kind of stuff. If we've got school age groups, children by kind of 1st September to end of August, you could have nearly a year's worth of growth and maturation development within a single cohort. And we might easily be persuaded to kind of select early those that are bigger, stronger, faster, more developed. And actually that might be a short-term win, but might not get you where you want to be long-term. So we might, for example, those that are physically less developed might actually develop better problem-solving skills or higher levels of technical ability or more resilient. Those early physical developers, conversely, they might be really successful early on because they're taller, bigger, but actually they might end up dropping out later down the line because they might not have developed the prerequisite technical and psychosocial skills. So we need that broader kind of holistic view of participants to help develop them for the long run. We take the image here of two players, same age. One's obviously got a physical advantage there. The shorter one is going to have better technical ability, better problem solving skills, quicker thinking to be successful. And what we can't even deduce from that picture is the smaller individual might be more psychosocially mature than the older individual. So it's about, again, trying to get that wide holistic view of participants that's going to help us make better decisions and offer better support in the long run. There's other ways we can look at it. We might look at, when we're thinking about sort of wider views of participants, we can see that like this transition model, Villeman and Lavalley, they talk about different athletic levels. So what level is a participant at? Where are they at in their journey is a really important aspect. We know from a childhood development perspective, children go through different phases and have different needs. You know, young children, childhood, primary school are very different to adolescents. And so adults are also very different to adolescents. So we need to have a bit of an understanding around sort of children and young people in general. We also know on a psychosocial level that, you know, the types of support and preferred support mechanisms are different. So we need to maybe attend to that a little bit in our coaching programs. We also know school is a huge area of children's lives. So that transition around kind of year 7 primary to secondary is huge. And how can we take all those bits of information and offer some best practice for these people? Was involved in a book chapter, Fika Rongen at Nottingham Trent led on that, and we started to look at psychosocial maturation and the implications for coaching children. So we've started to slowly address some of these things as well. So that might be worth a look. I'll move over to you, James.
Okay, so this is an example of it's a talent ID program that the English Cricket Board are doing called Multiple Eyes Multiple Times. Because this is PowerPoint Live as well, you can actually click on that and see the article about it. But I mean, this is relevant to any context, even in grassroots, I think. So it's important, going back to what we said earlier about measuring people across different time periods, particularly with adolescents, perhaps teenagers. They can look like world beaters one week, and then they can look like they've got 2 left feet the next week. So you never know what's going on. It might be emotional, it might be hormonal, could be stuff going on at school with parents, all sorts. So it's important that we don't pay too much attention to that fast thinking, and we think a little bit deeper about this and maybe see them over a period of time, and also multiple eyes through different people's eyes, so we've got them from different angles. Everyone will have their different opinions. Someone who's maybe an ex-player might have a different opinion to someone who isn't. Someone who's coached longer, for example, they've all got their own things that they can bring to it. So any sort of scouting or talent ID meetings, it's good to have an opinion, so maybe don't discuss it with other people beforehand so you don't get influenced. Have an independent opinion. Talking again of unconscious bias, groupthink, maybe where you're pressured to think like other people within the group, sort of peer pressure, or confirmation bias is like where you try and get other people to agree with you. So these are all things that can occur sometimes when we're talking about players. You might use a devil's advocate, so someone who's sort of deliberately given the opposite opinion, just so we can argue it out and you get the pros and cons. And then it's whether you take a developmental versus a winning kind of approach. But we should be looking at the whole player. So again, it's not just the technical and physical. We also need to look at the psychosocial as well. So it's performance against potential. So are we looking at that player as they are now, on just what they do on the pitch, or are we looking a little bit deeper from different angles and at different times to try and find that information out? Okay, over to you, Tom.
Nice. So we start moving on to like how do we maybe go about planning and thinking and doing around psychosocial skill development. So there's a few different routes we can take, and hopefully over these next slides we give you ideas. Two very broad approaches here are kind of the FA and other national governing bodies. They have frameworks, ideas to kind of support coaches. So the FA, so My Sports Football, very similar to James. So probably some of these examples will be football related, but that's not to say they can't be applied elsewhere. So the FA has a 4-corner model that could be delivered separately in silos. So we could have really clear, football looking sessions. We could go in the gym and do our physical bit. We could do some interaction and sort of team stuff for our social, and we could do some psychological development workshop sessions. So we might argue a separate approach might attend to all those corners. There's also an integrated approach, which is something that we probably think is very, very appropriate. And there's this nice analogy of the rope with all those different colours and strands of technical, tactical, psychological, physical and social all together in one, and potentially using the game. So those activities and those development sessions look like football to those participants, feel like football to those participants, delivered by the coach that might be being formed by other people. So this integrated approach is something that we'd advocate. That's for you, James.
Yeah, so as mentioned there, probably the person that spends most time with them is the coach. So if we can upskill the coach and get them comfortable with some of this terminology and get them delivering, then all the better. So that 4-corner model is maybe something like you can see there. So the technical parts would be kind of position specific. You've got the goalkeeping there in purple. Tactical would be pretty much down to sort of individual club philosophies or organisational philosophies. Physical, again, position specific, and then psychosocial would probably be very individual based cases. Some might already be quite strong in some areas, and some might need developing in some areas. So this is kind of the model that we would sort of work towards. And as mentioned, there tends to be a lot of focus on these technical, physical ones. Okay, you can see them quite easily, you can measure them quite easily, The psychosocial, you can't sort of just have a look inside someone's head, so they're harder to actually ascertain and then harder to develop. But as mentioned before, they are the most important when it comes to development and performance at an elite level. Back to you, Tom.
Yeah, thank you. So this is an example of something we did. I've got a role at Doncaster Rovers. I've had a role for quite a bit at Doncaster Rovers in the academy, looking after some of the psych. And I've developed the current psych programme. One of the things that we did in terms of looking at psychosocial development, one of those things was actually, like, in the first place, deciding what we thought would be important to develop. It's a bit like the task and the poll that we did earlier. We spent, or I, with coaches, spent a lot of time kind of watching training, watching games, talking about what players are doing, what they're not doing, combined with some of my kind of academic background around reading around kind of what's important for high level performance, combined with my knowledge of childhood development. We came up with these 8 what we call pillars at our club, and in theory they're nothing new to what sort of James and me have presented earlier, things like confidence, commitment, self-awareness. We've talked briefly about some of those things already. But what we tried to do is come up with 3 or 4 different items that each age and stage could possibly do for us to be able to say, yeah, they're showing commitment or they're showing control. So each of those 3 broad columns, so foundation phase, which is under 9s to under 12s, youth development phase, 13s to 16s, professional development phase, 17s up to about 21. We kind of differentiated different behaviours and things that players should be doing to demonstrate that particular pillar. And what that allowed us to do was, it allowed coaches to have a common language, a shared view, a shared mental model. And it actually gave us something to loosely start to decide whether somebody was high in confidence or low in confidence. So having a view of what these things look like is quite a useful thing to do. We found that really useful in the football club.
Okay, so another method you can use, and this is, I find this a really useful one. So it's holistic as well, as you can see. So we're looking across all 4 corners. So something called performance profiling. So dead simple to do. Depending on how much sort of time and energy you've got, you can pre-fill these, the technical, tactical, physical, psych ones, which I've done before to save a little bit of time. If you do have the time, it's useful to get the players to actually come up with these themselves. Quite big on autonomy and self-awareness, so the more the players can do themselves, the better. So they'll identify for their position, if they're in positions, what the most important factors are for that position from the 4 corners. We pre-filled the psychosocial ones there. Again, these are ones that come from our research. So once you've done that, you would then, the player would then mark themselves out of 10 as how they feel they are now. And the coach would give a score as well. And then you kind of take a mean score, and that would identify what the highest and sort of lowest scores were. And you can take more scores if you want. Someone I'm working with at the minute, I've actually got 4 lots of scores for him, which is good. So it gives me more data. But just coach and player a good starting point. Okay, so once you've done that, you can then identify what their super strengths are, what they're really good at, which is just as important as kind of identifying what they need to work on. And it's up to you how you address that. I know it's quite a PC thing now to call it areas for improvement, or whether you call it weaknesses. I tend to ask the players, and I tend to prefer weaknesses because I think it's good to acknowledge that everyone has them, and it gives the players something that they can then turn into a strength. Okay, so once we've identified that, we can then decide what we want to work on. And sometimes it's just as well to work on strengths as it is weaknesses. If they've got weaknesses that aren't going to affect them and aren't going to get them out of the team, then why not work on strengths? Because that's what got them in the team in the first place. Okay, over to you, Tom.
Yeah, nice. So once you've got a view of what these things look like, and you've made some assessment of maybe what these super strengths are or potential areas for development, you might want to feed that back to players, so they're even aware of what the plan is. So at Doncaster, we've got some resource, and we're able to produce these really nice sort of FIFA type cards that young kids really like to kind of integrate with and use, and it's a really nice way of giving feedback. It's something they can have in their hand and something they can see, and it's really useful. It's well received. They like that kind of stuff. There's a link, and again, being PowerPoint Live, you can go on that link, and that's to create some electronic versions of something like that for free. It doesn't really cost anything. So there's different ways in which you can feed back to your players, but that kind of coach feeding back to player, maybe if they're a bit older, working with players to develop some of these attributes that we're talking about, is really useful. But I think you've got to really feed back to your players as well somehow. But there's some examples there. And back to you, James.
Yeah, so once we've done that, this is what we call a periodized table. So it looks quite complicated, but it's actually quite simple. So this is something they did in an academy lab. You could do something similar at grassroots. It doesn't have to be quite as busy as this, but working across different weeks. So with this particular academy, they worked across a 6-week block, and there was 6 6-week blocks. Okay, so across those 6 weeks, we divided it up. So we were working with 2 players a week, and then week 6 was like a consolidation week. Okay, so in week 1, as you can see there, we worked with the winger and the fullback. We looked at what their super strengths were, and we looked at what they needed to improve, and then we designed the sessions around that. So the session planning, what we do on the grass, was actually based on these super strengths and areas for improvement, including the psychosocial stuff, which we've actually embedded into the game, which I won't steal Tom's thunder because he's going to go into a little bit more detail on that in the next slide, I believe.
Yeah, thank you. So probably just zooming out and looking across a little bit, you might be thinking, well, how am we going to consider all this kind of information that's being given? Something that's very much a prototype, but something that I think works. The PACER approach, which is something that I've been working on recently, and this might really help you if you think about where do I start. So we've got this acronym PACER, and I'll just step through it. So I'll guide you left to right on the slide that you can see there. So the P of PACER, plan. You do need to plan which psychosocial skills and characteristics that you're wanting to develop within your program. Which ones are they? What might they look like at different ages and stages? What might they look like in competition? What might they look like in training? And building up that view of what these things look like so you can talk about them. You might plan with regards to what the game demands are. So you might have a very sort of technical and tactical curriculum, and you might drive the focus of psychosocial skills based on the type of game demands or sport demands that are in and around that curriculum. But you've got to know what you're going after from a starting point. The A is approach. There's probably 2 very broad approaches that you can take. One of them, you could take a more traditional curriculum or program approach, where you might for 2, 4, 6 weeks focus on a specific psychosocial skill and characteristic, and then move on to the next one. And that might be an approach that you take. You might also do a more kind of bullseyed or individualized approach and try, a bit like what James did in the previous slide. You might start to like bullseye in on players every so often, so it's what the player needs at that time. Then once you've decided your approach, then really it's about coaching it, and that might be your coach behaviors, that might be your practice designs, the things that you do in your sessions. So example, you might manipulate game conditions. So we might use, for example, overload. So if we're thinking defense v attack, you overload your strikers, or more strikers than defenders. That'll probably increase the success rate for strikers. So maybe more shots, more goals, which is great. But conversely, the defenders are under immense pressure and stress, which might actually kind of attend to or promote some emotional regulation, resilience type traits coming out. You might isolate individuals and bullseye in on people. You might adopt player-led sessions if you want to give autonomy to players and help with their decision making and sharing of information and debating and working out what the best way to approach something is. As a coach, you might use simple praise. You know, if you see a really nice example of a communication or confidence or resilience or something like that, praise it in the moment, and like you would a technical skill or a tactical decision. The environment is the things around the coaching session. So it might be you have a video bank and you're getting players to reflect and review some of their experiences watching videos of maybe players in a first team or an elite performance in a different sport. You might choose to play players in different age groups. If you've got a range of age groups in, for example, a talent development system, you know, you play up, you're going to up the challenge point, you're going to make it more difficult. You might be able to give them some skills like imagery, self-talk, breathing prior to that. You might play them up and increase the challenge point. You might reflect on that afterwards. You might play players out of position. You might sub players on and off at times when they might not want to. And it puts them in slightly uncomfortable situations where they're going to have to deal with that. And we can help, support, guide them, reflect on those sort of things. We might support player-led warm-ups, for example, or player-led team talks if we want to develop communication. And that I put in green, you know, that's really kind of context specific, depends on resource, depends on how many people you've got, you know, you're probably from a range of sports, and it also needs to be developmentally appropriate. So what might be appropriate for a 9-year-old is going to be very different to what's appropriate for a 14-year-old, for example. So those sort of broad suggestions, they are context specific and they must be developmentally appropriate. Then what you need to do really is review what you're doing, you know, review your session, ask yourself what went well, even better if, and then start to think about, are these activities having an impact? Are they having a positive impact on player psychosocial development? So yeah, the PACER approach is something that we would advocate for you to consider. And we've got a video, James.
Yeah. So another quite an easy technique you can use. Tom sort of mentioned it there about the video banks is using role models. So we might have if someone behaves in a certain way in a certain context, we can maybe say, oh, what would such and such do in this situation, or vice versa, what would be a bad example. So this is just a short video of my favorite ever Premier League player. It's also got my favorite ever Premier League goal on it, which is a bonus. So just if you listen to what he's talking about, there's some quite decent messages in there from the sort of psychosocial corner. Okay, so I think there's some great messages in there about kind of self-evaluation and always trying to improve yourself, but always also kind of being happy with what you've achieved as well. So little clips like that are great. You can get off YouTube, you can share them on Spond or WhatsApp or whatever platform you use. some positive role models, even maybe negative role models as good examples. So just an example of a game you might use to develop this. So this is just a little Querva 1v1 game that I use quite a bit, that kind of, for me, is good for developing confidence, decision-making, commitment, resilience. So to talk you through it, blue player will serve to the red player and then go and press. Red player needs to beat the blue player and get it back to the blue's corner and stop it on the cone there for 10 points. It's a continuous game, so if blue wins the ball, they can try and stop it by a red corner and they get 10 points. Or if they want an easy 5 points, either player can go to either side of the square. So obviously you can, depending on who you pair the players against, you can challenge them. You can maybe make it a bit easier for them to boost their confidence. Maybe encourage more positive decision making. So if they're always going for an easy 5 points, can you step in, coach them, maybe give them points that'll help them get to that 10 points, and then commitment, so that they're really going for it, and resilience, that they're dealing with mistakes as well. So that's a great little game for doing that. And I've got a video clip of that, which shows this in action. This is the same game. The tempo is not great, but if you get an idea if you could maybe think about how you would coach this. So there's obvious sort of technical points in this, but from a psychosocial or a psych point of view, how would you coach this? What might your coaching points be? Okay, so apart from obviously intensity and tempo, I'll play that clip again. If you guys want to put anything in the chat box about how you might coach it, so what observable behaviours you might be seeing there, what sort of support, guidance, feedback you might be giving the players. So like I say, I'll play that again. If you want to put some comments in the chat box, that would be great. Okay, play it again. Last time, I promise. Okay, so for me, kind of, oops, one sec, get it in the right place. Around about this point, my kind of coaching points would be to the green player. Okay, so why is he kind of stopped there? Why is he given up? So there's a lack of commitment, maybe a lack of resilience. Just stepping in and coaching him, maybe what would such and such a player do in this situation? In my era, it might have been Roy Keane or Bobby Robson. Probably be someone else now, I'd imagine. But coaching them and trying to encourage them to not give up. The white player might have had a bad touch, the ball might have come loose, anything could happen. So again, it's concentration as well, because if you switch off in the game, that's going to be detrimental. Okay, so little ways you can coach that, and I've done this in a couple of ways where maybe we've done it where there's two coaches. So one coach might be working with the main squad. The other coach might take 2 or 3 players who particularly need to work on these things away and work on that in one grid. I've also done this. It's a really good warm-up kind of practice where you do it with the entire squad. And say you've got 12 players, you might have 4 grids, and you can do promotion and relegation. So you do 3-minute games. If they win, they move up. Whoever's got the most points. Whoever kind of loses will move down, and the middle player will stay where they are. And it does kind of differentiate a little bit there. So you get the better players playing against each other, and maybe the ones that struggle. And then you can go in and isolate and decide which ones you want to coach as well. So that's a good little tip there. So just to summarize, really, as a coach, it's really important, and I think this is at any level, that we focus on process over the outcome. So if you get the process right, if you get all the little bits right, then the outcome, the winning will take care of itself, almost like a byproduct. Okay, so the result will look after itself. Okay, so make sure you differentiate, get to know your players, what makes them tick, what's going on in their life, personal life, at home, at school, without obviously breaking any boundaries. Be aware of your unconscious biases in there and other people around you. Are there any maturation issues? There's lots of really good clips and information around the teenage brain and what happens during adolescence, whether you're an early or late maturer, relative age effect, which Tom mentioned earlier. There's loads of stuff around this. We have to bear in mind, maybe at that age, teenagers are going to be a bit more surly, a bit more risk-taking and kind of harder to deal with, but there is a reason for that. It's not really their fault. And I think it's trying things out. Because I think the worst phrase in any organisation is, this is the way we've always done it. So try things out, use evidence if you can, use your experience. A really good quote there from John McDermott, who's a top kind of coach developer at the FA. It's the balance between art and science. Okay, so the stuff we've been talking about, the theory stuff, is the science. The art is then what you do as a coach. So how do you adapt that to your context, and how do you get it on the pitch, and how do you adapt it to your individual players? And above all, let's remember whose game it is. Okay, it's theirs, not ours. And if there's one word above any that I've kind of learned is really important, whether as a coach or a psych, is to enjoy it. Okay, to go out and enjoy it. It's amazing what you can achieve when you create that environment, and that happens even at kind of super elite international level, as I'm going to show you now. Yeah, so I think if that's happening at that level, then that's something we can aspire to at all levels of the game. And one of the questions that came up earlier was should it all be all about enjoyment? Is it not kind of, is it not sometimes more difficult than that? So one of the things we need to bear in mind is we do need to challenge players as well. It's not about trying to make things easy and an easy pathway. It's challenging them, but making sure that we do that at the right level and provide the right level of support for them as well whilst they're doing that. Okay, so final slide for you, Tom.
Yeah, so as we come to the end of this session now, we just want to make you aware that we are looking to curate or invite you to a live session where we might be able to actually do some actual practical activities, share ideas, give you some ideas, maybe allow you to have a go at designing some sessions and having a go. So we will be putting out on socials at some point or directly emailing people around a live session in early 2025 at Leeds Beckett. So really look forward to kind of finalising the details of that and getting that out there for people to consider. And yeah, thank you very much for giving up an hour of your time this evening. I hope you found it useful. I'm going to stop the recording now and then just invite any questions, and we can hang on a little bit after the time. But yeah, thank you very much for giving up your time.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everyone.